Right. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Fragkiskos Filippaios. I'm the director for the South and East Network for Social Sciences, and I'd like to welcome you all to this session around SENSS. Ask SENSS, we call them open events. This session has a dual purpose. First of all, is for me to give you some information, summarize the information that we have on the website around SENSS, but most importantly, is for you to be able to ask questions around the studentships, around the process we follow, everything like that. Now, in terms of housekeeping, a couple of things I'd like to highlight. First of all is I will be recording the webinar, and shortly after the end of the session, hopefully by early next week, the session will be on the website, so you can review the session and you can review the questions that colleagues will be asking. So that's one thing. The second thing in terms of housekeeping is I'd like you to ask as many questions as you like. You might be seeing me from time to time turning to my side is because I've got my second screen where I've got the chat function open. So there are two ways of asking questions. One way is for you to put your question in the chat. You could either put it towards everyone and I'll pick it up, or send it directly to me. Or towards the end of the webinar, what we will do is hopefully we'll have some time and people can raise their hands. And once you raise your hand, you can come on mic and ask your question. There might be some questions that I decide to take offline, in the sense they could be very specific questions that perhaps they need additional information for me to provide the response. And generally what I tend to do during these webinars is I look at my chat function and I pick questions as we go along. And that means that, I might be stopping the presentation, addressing the question, answering the question, especially if it's something quite specific about that particular section of the presentation. And this is how we will go. We have planned for an hour and a half. Usually it does take an hour and a half because of the number of questions I tend to address. And throughout the presentation, I will be covering four main areas. First of all, why do a PhD? The main way I would like you to approach this section of the presentation is by thinking around your motivation, thinking around why you want to do a PhD and why you would like to do the PhD with SENSS. I'll be talking about the motivations behind students, student purposes, and this is going to be useful material for you to be putting into your personal statement. As part of the application process, we require you to provide us with a personal statement, which is around 500 words. And in that personal statement, we want you to tell us something about yourself. Why are you motivated to do a PhD? Why in particular SENSS, and why the particular topic that you have selected. So that first part, which is why do a PhD, is kind of addressing, giving you the background of what you could put into your motivation statement. I'll then spend some time providing information around SENSS and telling you a bit more about the competition, the student-led competition we're running. I'll then spend a very small amount of time talking about finding a supervisor and giving you some advice from my experience over the years dealing with PhD students and how to approach potential supervisors. And then the final part of the presentation is going to be about the proposal. And obviously, it would be very straightforward for me to tell you how to write a proposal, but I think the most important bit in terms of giving you information is to explain to you the process through which and the criteria we use through which we evaluate proposals. So in essence, I'll tell you which are the things that are quite important for the different panels when they review your proposals, and what you need to be careful, what are the important bits that you need to definitely be highlighting your proposal. So that's how the session will run. Let me start then by saying why do a PhD? And as I said, a lot of the information I will be sharing with you today has to do with my experience over the years as a supervisor, and also my experience with SENSS. I've been involved with SENSS for the last 8 years now, from a variety of positions, and being the director for the last year. So I know all the different kind of aspects of the doctoral training partnership. Let me start by addressing the first bit, which is why do a PhD? And I imagine most of you, given that you are here today in this session, you have already started thinking about that question, or you might have already the answer to that question. But one of the assumptions I would like to kind of break down, demolish, is that the PhD is solely an academic qualification. And the common assumptions that people have is that usually students who obtain PhDs, went they went on to become professors. Then the best doctoral students become professors, and there is a very clear career path of someone with a PhD, from an assistant to an associate to a full professor. And the reality is far from that. Actually, the way we now structure the PhD has almost two parallel components. There is an important aspect which has to do with your training, but also personal development. And the other aspect is obviously your proposal and the PhD, which is a contribution to knowledge that you need to do in order to obtain the PhD. So it's not simply a creation of new knowledge, but it's also a significant training plan. And that training plan, the way it is currently structured through SENSS, it's a training plan that aims at giving you all the skills and all the tools to pursue careers within, but also outside the academia. And I can give you one very concrete example. The example is that every single PhD that we fund, so every single one that gets a studentship from SENSS will effectively receive an additional 3 months of funding in order to undertake what we call an integrated placement. And that will mean that you get your stipend, you get your fees paid for 3 additional months in order to work with an organization and transfer and engage with that organization and transfer your knowledge to that organization, knowledge that you have obtained throughout your PhD. That placement can take place anytime between your the second part of your first year until the first part of your third year. So you've got about 2.5 years where you can basically do that placement. It's something that you can discuss with your supervisor. You can find an organization that fits your needs, but also we will be providing opportunities for placements as SENSS that we would like students to undertake. So in essence, we will be preparing you not only for a career in the academia. We won't be only giving you, high level, advanced, quantitative, qualitative training in research methods, training in literature reviews, but we also will be giving you training of how to engage with external organizations, how to transfer your knowledge, how to think outside the academia. And every year, just to give you another example, we're doing an annual conference where we invite all SENSS students, doctoral researchers. Next year, next summer in July, the annual conference is going to be hosted by the University of Cranfield. And effectively, the theme of the conference, the topic of the conference is social sciences beyond academia. So we're going to be talking about the way social sciences goes outside the academic world and impacts, engages with the real world, the world of practice out there. And that world of practice can range from, small and medium enterprise businesses to the government and the third sector charities as well. So all the preparation is there for you to develop skills that will enable you to work outside the academia. Now, what's the purpose of pursuing a PhD? Someone could summarize it in 3 main areas, and in no way these have some form of order, and in no way are contradictory to each other. So they could be very complementary. Someone could have all 3 purposes that there are there. Someone could have a dominant one. Someone could have one and develop another over the course of the PhD. But in general, we talk about 3 things. First of all, what we call instrumental purposes. You see as a PhD, the PhD as a tool that will get you into a career. Most people tend to think about that in an academic world, but also a lot of organizations, research organizations, require you to do doctoral and postdoctoral studies in order to be qualified to work for them. The second purpose is the intellectual one. Someone has a personal interest on a topic, draws satisfaction from doing research, feels that they want to contribute to discipline. And the example I usually have here is, myself, I'm an active researcher. I tend to do work. My area of expertise is international business. I explore the way multinationals are influenced by the institutional environment in the locations they hold subsidiaries. And I give the example that I do quite a lot of applied work. I build big data sets with investments and, institutional frameworks. And it's 11 o'clock in the evening. My new data set is there, ready for me to get my first results. The question is, do I switch off my computer and go to bed? Or do I actually hit the enter button in my statistical software and wait for the first results? And in my perspective, I will always hit that enter button and wait for the first results to come out, because it gives me personal interest. It gives me satisfaction to see my work there. And then, of course, people could have also what we call altruistic purposes. So we have cases in the past where people come from a particular background, coming with diverse problems. They want to have a real problem that they would like to solve. They want to enable change in an organization. They want to create something that will benefit others. They want to give something back, as I call it. And that's the third kind of purpose that someone could have. And as I said, you could have either one or all three of them, or a combination of each one of them. Just what we would expect you to do in that personal statement is to reflect on these purposes and highlight the ones that you consider the most important. And by highlight, I mean that you need to provide us with a few examples of why you want to do the PhD. Right. Let me just quickly check whether the questions that are on there already. There is a question which is around the research proposal. I'll come back to that later on. I'll also come back to that in a minute on how many PhDs we will be funding this year. And I will also be talking about the 1+3. There is no more 1+3 in our terminology. It's a 3.5 to 4.5 funding route. And I'll explain that as we go along. So all the questions that are there at the moment, I will be picking them up as we go along. So the next part is I'd like to provide some additional information making sense of SENSS, and what SENSS is and what we offer and how we do things. First of all, we are what we call a doctoral training partnership. We are funded from the Economic and Social Research Council. The ESRC, in short, is one of 7 research councils which are funded by UK Research Innovation. The research councils are defined by the disciplines. So ESRC is Economic and Social Research. There is the AHRC, which is Arts and Humanities Research Council. There is the NERC, which is the Natural Environment Research Council. There is one on biosciences. There is one on medicine. There is the EPSRC, which is engineering. So each of those councils has a particular area that it covers. And at the moment, the ESRC is funding 15 doctoral training partnerships across the UK and Northern Ireland. So SENSS is one out of the 15. And the reason I'm always saying that is that we do cover a particular geographical area, but you might want to explore applying to other institutions. So while as an applicant, you cannot apply from 2 different institutions within SENSS. So for example, one cannot apply through Essex and East Anglia. You will need to decide which one of the 2. There's nothing stopping you from making multiple applications across the 15 doctoral training partnerships. So to the extreme, someone could do 1 application per each of those doctoral training partnerships. And as I said, there are 15 of them. The ones which are close to, the geographical area of the Southeast are the Cambridge one, with Cambridge and Anglia Ruskin universities, universities SENSS. There is also CDARC, which is Southeast Doctoral Training Arc, and that includes Reading, Surrey, Sussex, Kent, Royal Holloway, and Kingston. There is the UBEL, which is University College London and University of East London. There is the LSE, which is a single institution doctoral training partnership. There is LIS, which is King's College and Imperial College. There is obviously the Wales Doctoral Training Partnership, the Scottish Doctoral Training Partnership. There is the White Rose Doctoral Training Partnership. So similar organizations like SENSS exist another 14 of them across the UK. And as I said, you could think about making an application to any other of those you would like. We receive funding from the ESRC, and through that funding, we managed to offer studentships and postdoctoral fellowships. Now, there was a question there about the number of studentships we will be offering. And last year, which was the first year of the second part of the funding, we were able to award 41 studentships. Now, 41 studentships, just to again put it into context, being the first year of SENSS in existence, we received roughly just over 400 applications. So there is a success rate of around 10%. I'm not saying it's not competitive, it is competitive, but at the same time, you need to have a very strong proposal to get through the final stages and the final rounds of the competition. But at the end of the day, if you do get this studentship, it is a life-changing opportunity. Now, that number of 41 could fluctuate every year because it depends on the number of how much time we give to each doctoral candidate. At the end of the process, we review every single application and we make a decision about the needs of that candidate with regards to their training and whether they would need a 3.5-year funding or a 4.5-year funding, which is the other extreme, which is someone coming straight from their undergraduate without major research training, which is what we used to talk about, the 1+3 before. So if someone wants to do an integrated PhD, which means a master's and a PhD, then the funding we will be offering will be 4.5 years. And that funding covers things like the placement, but also covers additional training that you might be doing. There have been cases in the past where someone came in with a master's and we simply gave them additional time. So we could give them 3.75 years because we feel that that student needs an additional 3 months to do, for example, some very advanced quantitative training like machine learning. So it depends on the individual, their background, and the project they will be doing. And this is how we decide whether someone will get anything between 3.5 to 4.5 years. So yes, it is possible for students coming straight through their undergraduate to apply for a SENSS studentship and for us to fund an additional year of doing a master's before they pursue the PhD. So roughly the number is about 40, 41, 42, 39. That's, I think, the fluctuation over the years. And as I said, the amount of time we will be funding ranges from 3.5 to 4.5 years. Just again, to put it into perspective, overall, the ESRC is funding around 500 postgraduate studentships every year, spread across the 15. We are we're not the biggest doctoral training partnership, but we are one of the bigger ones in terms of the number of studentships we offer. Most of the others offer slightly smaller number of studentships. There are 2 or 3 that offer significantly higher number of studentships, but generally most DTPs will offer anything between 30 and 50 studentships each. The partners in our doctoral training partnership in South and East Network for Social Sciences is 8 partners. We have 8 partners, 8 universities: East Anglia in Norwich, Essex, which is the coordinating institution. Then you've got Goldsmiths, City, Middlesex and Roehampton, which are in London. And then you've got Cranfield and Lincoln. So these are the kind of 8 partners that constitute SENSS. One of the things that I'd like to highlight here, talking about universities, that SENSS does not award the PhD. The way SENSS operates is you register for a PhD in one of those 8 institutions. You become a student of those institutions. And from our perspective, what we do is we complement that with the funding. So we're responsible for the funding. We're not responsible for the academic side. We're not awarding a PhD. We're not an award holding institution. The PhD will have to come from those 8 institutions. And then, as I said, we will then offer you the funding to pursue the PhD. And I'm saying that because sometimes people say, oh, I've applied to SENSS and that's my job done. And I'll say in a minute that actually what is quite crucial and important in this process is for you to make an application for a PhD place in one of those 8 institutions before you apply to SENSS. So imagine you're applying for funding, but you haven't got a PhD place. We won't be able to offer you that fund. You need to have applied for the PhD, and then we will be able to offer you the funding on the basis of that PhD. So that's quite crucial to highlight and ensure. And as I said, you can find a bit more about the partners through the website and our website. Should you be successful, what you will get and what is our offering? We are working in a very interdisciplinary research environment, and I'll talk a bit about that in a minute when I refer to our thematic approach. We will be offering you subject-specific, but also advanced training. We will be giving you access to SAGE Campus online. So this is a fantastic online training facility, which you could learn online doing, R, Python, learn a bit about research methods. It's all under what we call the virtual learning environment that we have. You will have access to all 8 institutions and their training activities. So if you are at East Anglia and there's an event at Essex that you would like to attend, you could do that as part of being a SENSS student. We have approximately 200 external organizations that we work with, and they offer us placements, they offer us research opportunities. And then also what we do is we have additional funding for you to do overseas field work, overseas visits. So for example, your supervisor has good connections with another collaborator in a top American institution. You will be receiving funding to go and do that visit, and you will be receiving also an extension to do that visit. And of course, additional money to attend, present at conferences, academic publishing. And as I said, all that is under our virtual learning environment. So what I'm saying there is, as an organization, and going back to the earlier point I've made about helping you to train and develop, we offer you abundance of opportunities. It's down to you and your supervisor, once you get in, to start thinking how you can utilize all those opportunities in your annual development plan, and how you will plan not only for the first year, but for the second and third year of your PhD, and what are the skills that you would like to develop. And I can reassure you that there's nothing that we can't offer you, or there's nothing that we can't find and support you finding in terms of training and development. Who's who in terms of SENSS? So myself, I'm the director. I have oversight of the organization, and I have oversight of the competitions. In essence, I will be dealing with you in the pre-selection and the selection stage. The person that will be dealing with you predominantly once you get in is our deputy director, Professor Mark Johnson from Goldsmiths, who is our training lead. So Mark, together with our training and development manager, Jenny Wilders, are the 2 people that are responsible for your training and development and supporting you throughout your studies. We've got a manager who is looking after the administrative side of your studentship, Dr. Felicity Cesnat. We've got two fantastic people that support us in terms of the competitions and the virtual learning environment, Rachel and Aaron. Aaron has done brilliant work on the website and the virtual learning environment. And then we've got a finance manager, Sarah McKenzie, who is there to ensure that your funding, your payments through your home institutions take place. And if we need any additional funding for extensions, we can basically tap into different sources of funding to secure that. So that's the team. And as I said, you will be meeting that team throughout the next stages of the competition, as well as once you start your PhD. And one of the words that I've mentioned before is this word around interdisciplinarity. And I just want to tell you a bit about the background. So until 2 years ago, the previous iteration of SENSS, which was Southeast Network for Social Sciences with a small e, was what we would call a discipline-based doctoral training partnership. So we had 13 different pathways, we call them pathways. Each of those pathways was mapped onto one of the areas in social sciences. So we had a pathway on business and management, we had a pathway on sociology, pathway on psychology, so on and so forth. And what was happening is students were applying to their home institutions and to that pathway. The pathways were evaluating applications, they were putting those applications forward, and it was very discipline-based, the whole process. In the development and the creation of this DTP, SENSS with the capital E, the South and East Network for Social Sciences, we said that, grand challenges and the issues we're currently facing as humanity cannot be addressed by single disciplines. We need to have a far more disciplinary, interdisciplinary approach. So what we did is I did an exercise, and that exercise basically was looking at the ESRC priorities. So what does the funder want to prioritize? What do they want to fund? Looking at the sustainable development goals, and then also looking at the research strengths of the 8 institutions. And through a process of iteration, we have developed these 6 thematic panels. Now, these are not in order of importance. They're equally important for us, and there is no quota in terms of studentships for each of those panels. So, every single application that is submitted within each of those panels gets evaluated on the basis of merit and on merit alone. So there is not that sustainability and climate emergency will receive 8 studentships or health and well-being will receive 10. There is nothing to suggest that one pathway will receive more than the others in terms of studentships. So 6 thematic panels, as we call them: sustainability and climate emergency, health, well-being and social care, justice institutions and social change, resolving uncertainty and addressing crisis, digital social sciences, and the 6th one is a more focused one, which is around advanced methods in social and economic research, and those can be quantitative or qualitative methods. I appreciate here that occasionally people might feel that their topic could fit into one or another or more than one thematic areas. I can give you an example. One of the successful PhD projects this year was from City University London, City St. George's University London, and the topic was on the use of artificial intelligence in developing leadership skill for radiographers. Now, that's a topic that could easily lend itself to the health, well-being, and social care, but also because of the implications from artificial intelligence, it could be a topic that go into digital social sciences. And my advice there is, in your application process, talk to the supervisor you've selected. And in the extreme case, you still have concerns and you still want to get additional advice, talk to us, email me with a summary of your proposal. And what I'll do is I'll provide you with some guidance in terms of which of those thematic areas you can fit into. The alternative would be to look at the information we've got on the website. So this is effectively a table which exists on the website in a slightly different format right now. But what it does, it gives you a sense of what contents each of those thematic areas covers. It gives you a sense of the sustainable development goals that that area covers, and also it tells you which are the ESRC priorities. Now, in no way this is an exhaustive table. So in no way this table covers everything. So someone could argue that, for example, affordable and clean energy, sustainable goal 7 might fit into digital social sciences as well. Again, I'm not suggesting that this cannot happen. What I'm suggesting is that this is a starting point for you to review. And given that someone was asking me, how can we have access to the PowerPoint? What's going to happen is the PowerPoint and the recording will be on the website soon after we finish the webinar. So you will have access and you will be able to re-review the information. So my suggestion is, think about your topic, look at the contents here, look at the sustainable development goals, look at the SRC priorities, and that gives you very good information on making a decision in which theme. And of course, there will be projects which are very straightforward in terms of the theme they fit into. So, this is easier job for some colleagues and some candidates. Now, the other crucial point that I would like to highlight here is that you can only apply through a university that participates in a thematic area. So the vast majority of institutions participate in all thematic areas, but there are 4 exceptions here. So for example, Cranfield doesn't participate at all in the health, well-being and social care or in the advanced methods for social and economic research. Middlesex doesn't participate in digital social sciences, and Lincoln doesn't participate in the advanced methods for social and economic research. So if you were to think about a project that develops new advanced methodological approaches and you said, oh, Cranfield is a good institution. Actually, that's not the case because Cranfield doesn't take part in that thematic area. And obviously institutions, this has been an institutional decision. So institutions, as we were developing SENSS, said, oh, these are the areas we have expertise and we would like to participate. As you could see, City, Essex, Goldsmiths, Roehampton and East Anglia participate in all thematic areas. So those are the institutions that, participate in every single one of them. There are these exceptions in the 3 smaller institutions that they don't take part. So you just need to think, my topic belongs to that area. Is the university that I'm thinking of applying to part of that area? If the answer is, if there is an X here, and the answer is yes, then you can proceed and apply through that institution. 3 steps to making an application for SENSS. First, and I will keep saying about that as many times as possible, you need to apply for a PhD place at your home institution. SENSS does not provide the PhD, it's the home institution that provides the PhD. We provide the funding for the PhD. So you need to apply for a PhD place at your home institution before the 22nd of January, because the 22nd of January is the deadline for SENSS. So if you apply for SENSS and then subsequently apply to the home institution, what's going to happen? Once the deadline for SENSS closes, we take the applications for SENSS and we send them back to the home institutions for the initial sifting. The home institution will see that application for SENSS funding and they will go and match it with your PhD application in their institution. Now, if they don't find that PhD application in their home institution, then they make the SENSS application ineligible because you have applied for the funding, but you haven't applied for the PhD. So it's really, really crucial to look through the websites of the 8 partners and identify whether they have, some of them might have slightly earlier deadlines than the 22nd of January. Most of them will be very close to the 22nd of January, but just to be on the safe side. Once you've done that, you create your HEI apply account. The button to create the HEI apply account is on the website. It is our application system. It's all online. and it will take you through a set of questions asking you to put your proposal, asking you to put your personal statement, asking you to provide details of your supervisory team. So that is important. And then the third important bit is develop your proposal with your supervisor and submit your online application. So it's quite important. The application submit upload link is on the website, and it takes you straight to HI apply. If you go through the SENSS website through the student-led competition, you will be able to find the link there. Now, we are here to talk about the main SENSS competition, which is the student-led, and this is the competition that attracts most studentships. So for 2025, we expect to have about 30 of those. The reason there is a discrepancy between the number that I'm presenting here and the number that we in total award, which is 41, is that we run a separate competition, and we will be having webinars on that competition later in the year. It's a competition which is a supervisor-led. So what happens, supervisors submit proposals to us, we decide on the projects, and then students can apply to undertake that specific project. We are in the process of selecting the supervisors at the moment, and what's going to happen is once we have the 8 or 9 proposals that will be selected, advertisements will go out in jobs.ac.uk and find a PhD. There will be advertisement on the website for the collaborative projects competition, and you can apply to as many of those projects you would like. And the remaining studentships are effectively awarded to the collaborative projects. 3 institutions have what we call ring fence awards. So Cranfield, Lincoln, and Middlesex will get, their top candidates will get an award irrespective of where they are in terms of the ranking of our final list. At the moment, we're looking for 2 awards for Cranfield, 2 awards for Middlesex, and 1 award for Lincoln. So if you apply through those institutions, you have a slightly higher chance of securing a studentship. And the deadline for the SENSS applications is 12 noon Greenwich Mean Time. So it's not your local time. I need to stress that because I've seen people struggling with that in the past. Forget your local time. It's 12 noon Greenwich, midday Greenwich Mean Time, when the competition is closing on the 22nd of January. So it's not about your local time. It's not about midnight. Check exactly how that translates. If you are an international candidate, check how that translates to your local time and make sure that you meet that deadline. Following the 22nd, there are 2 stages. The first stage is the stage that I've mentioned already, institutional shifting. So what we do is we take, let's say, 400 applications at SENSS, and we return those 400 applications to the institutions. The institutions, each one of them looks through their pool of PhD candidates. They match your SENSS application with your PhD application, and then they do an initial sift of those applications to decide which ones they will progress to the next stage. They can submit 1 candidate per unit of assessment per thematic panel. You don't need to worry about that at the moment, but just to give you a sense, larger institutions tend to have more nominations they could do. But in addition, they can submit up to 2 candidates that coming from underrepresented backgrounds. 1 can have any protected characteristic. The other one needs to be a BAME candidate. So these are in addition to the normal kind of nominations they can make. Again, a disclaimer here, and I'm afraid that the candidates with protected characteristics can only be home candidates. So if you are an international candidate from an ethnic minority background, I'm afraid that does not apply to you. We're currently, and it's not our decision, this is an ESRC decision, we're currently working with the ESRC to see whether we can enable that change for candidates that are coming from international backgrounds and come from ethnic minority groups. Once the institutions put the nominations forward to SENSS, we have what we call a thematic panel shifting. 6 panels meet, evaluate applications, and decide which are the strongest ones to progress to the next round. And we create then from those nominations a single list, starting from the top candidate in terms of their score to the bottom candidate. We usually have a list of about 80 candidates at that stage. And from those 80, last year we had to go down to position 60 just to make sure that we offer all our studentships. And the offers are usually made in April. The current date for the management board is the 2nd of April. We shortly after make offers, and we would expect you to start in October 2025 your PhD studies. A very frequent question that I get here is, I have started my PhD already. Am I eligible to apply? The answer is yes, as long as at the point in which you get your studentship, which means in October 2025, you have at least 50% of your time left in your PhD. So if you've started your PhD in October 2024, you are eligible. If you started your PhD or if you're starting your PhD in January 2025, you will still be eligible. If you started your PhD in January 2024, you're still eligible. Anyone who has started their PhD before January 2024, it's highly unlikely that they will be eligible for funding. So that's the important thing. I'm not saying that, I haven't said that schools have less applicants. What I'm saying is that Cranfield, Lincoln, and Middlesex basically have what we call ring-fenced studentship. So they will automatically be awarded a studentship if their students get to the management, to that final list effectively. So irrespective of the position, those candidates will be on the list. So someone could be on the last place. If they are a Cranfield, Lincoln, or Middlesex candidate, they will automatically get a studentship. So that's the process for the competition. Some additional details here. I said the length of your award will be determined by what we call a development needs analysis. If you go through the application on HI Apply, there are several questions asking you to tell us a bit about your prior training, your prior experience, professional experience, things like that. And that helps us understand what kind of skills you have and what kind of skills you need to do the project. And on that basis, we will offer you anything in between 3.5 years to 4.5 years, which is the maximum for candidates coming straight from their undergraduate studies. As I said, that time includes an integrated placement, which is up to 3 months. And on top of the 4.5 or 3.5 years, you could get additional time to do an overseas institutional visit, field work, difficult language training. So for example, imagine a project that wants to do extensive field work in sub-Saharan Africa in a place where the student doesn't speak the language. The student in their application, they can request additional funding, to learn the language, and that could be up to 6 months, plus additional funding to do an extensive field work there, which is again up to 6 months. So that means that someone with a 3.5 years, should they ask for difficult language training and field work, they could get up to 4.5 years effectively. And on top of that, you can also access what we call research training and support grant, which is about 750 per annum, or a maximum of £3,500 per the duration of the award, which is money that yourselves and your supervisor, you can decide where you spend, whether it can be spent on, let's say, training events, attending conferences, things like that. Can someone who already has a master's degree apply for the master's and PhD category? The answer in principle is yes, in the sense that For example, imagine someone that has done a master's in, I don't know, engineering, and that individual wants to do then a PhD, which is straight social sciences in business and management. Now, that master's, we wouldn't expect it to be helping them significantly with the research methods training. So, and this is why I said earlier that we look at every single case on an individual basis. So the answer there is yes, if the master's you have done already doesn't have any research component, you haven't been trained in conducting research methods or anything like that, there is a very big chance that we might not be funding a full master's again, but we might be giving you, for example, instead of 3.5, 4 years, and we'll say, look, in the additional half a year, what we would like you to do is 1, 2, 3, 4 things that will give you the skills to pursue the PhD. So that's the way we make decisions. As I said, the recording will be available on the website, and then it's going to be also available on our YouTube channel. So if you want to share it with others, you could do it through those links. Now, some additional important information. First of all, you don't need to have a master's. You may be eligible for an award if you have equivalent professional experience, an undergraduate degree plus relevant professional experience. Before you start your application, we would expect you to discuss that with your supervisor. You could do the PhD on a full-time or part-time basis. The only issue here is that the part-time basis cannot be less than 50% of the time spent on the PhD. So you can't say, oh, I will be working 3 days a week for an organization and doing the PhD 2 days a week, which is 40%. That's not acceptable, not by us, but by the SRC. So you need to basically be doing 3 days or 2.5 days on the PhD and 2.5 days on any other work. So, and anything between 50% and 100%, which is a full-time, is acceptable. We can work through that. All studentships are fully funded, irrespective of your residential eligibility status. So, irrespective of whether you're home or international applicant, your fees, which is quite important, will be fully paid. We won't be asking you, if you're an international candidate, to top up your fees. Your fees will be covered through your studentship, and your home institution won't be asking you for any fees throughout your funding period. I'll come to the question in a minute, Esther. And 4 stages: check your eligibility, apply to your chosen university, discuss your application with your supervisor, and then apply for the SENSS studentship. As I said earlier, check the deadline of your chosen university. It might be slightly earlier than the SENSS. Our deadline for the funding is 12 o'clock Greenwich Mean Time on Wednesday, the 22nd of January. And as I said, you're only permitted to submit one application for a student-led studentship. You can't submit an application through East Anglia, another application through Essex, another application through Lincoln. You can apply to as many doctoral training partnerships as you like, but you can only apply through one institution for SENSS. The only case where you can do multiple applications is if you're applying for a collaborative studentship, which are the studentships I mentioned earlier, will be advertised possibly in December, and those will be specific projects advertised with a specific supervisor. So it's not going to be your own project. It's going to be something that the supervisor has suggested. They are usually working with a collaborative partner, and you can apply for those, and you can apply for as many of those as you want. You can apply for those and for a SENSS student-led project. There is nothing suggesting you can't do that. So you could do multiple applications for collaborative. You could do only one for SENSS. You could do multiple applications through other doctoral training partnerships. Now, I've got a question here from Josephine. How do I find the list of universities in partnership with the ESRC? The ESRC on the website, if you go esrc.org/ Google ESRC doctoral training partnerships, it will give you the full list of the 15 doctoral training partnerships that ESRC funds, and they actually have active links for each one of those, and you will see the institutions that take part in each one of those. And going back to Esther's question, and I'm reading them for the purposes of the recording, can international students who are applying for pre-masters apply for the SENSS studentship? The answer is yes. You can apply for a SENSS studentship even if you only have an undergraduate degree. What might happen there is we might give you additional time to do the master's and the PhD at the same time, one after the other. But what we will do is we will look at your individual application, and through that individual application, we will make an evaluation of how much training you need to undertake that PhD. And at that point, we will make a decision whether we will be giving you 3.5, 3.75, 4 to 5 years for your studentship. Josephine, I'm not entirely sure I understand. Are there any community ones that can join to find like-minded people for the funding? So whether there are, so let me take a step back here. One of the things we will be doing, and we're trying to set the dates now, is we have a very active student community and student committee. I am working currently with 2 students from that student committee to have 2 additional webinars to the ones that I am doing, where I will be doing a very brief introduction on SENSS. Then I will be leaving the room and I will be letting candidates talk directly to our student committee members who are current students effectively. And you can then explore, other questions that you might not feel comfortable in asking in this particular setting. So this is what kind of community we have. Now, the English qualification from our perspective at SENSS, we don't require you to have any English qualification, but that is a requirement for your PhD registration. So these kind of qualifications will be required by your home institution. This is why I said earlier, we don't deal with the academic side of things in terms of the registration. You are registering, you're applying for a PhD place. So if, for example, Essex requires an IELTS of 7, that's an Essex requirement. If East Anglia requires an IELTS of 6.5, that's an UEA requirement. So it will depend. It will depend on kind of what kind of requirements the home institution has. So at SENSS, we don't ask you for IELTS or English language qualification. We don't ask you for references as well. So as part of your SENSS application, the only person that provides you with a reference, which is not in reality a reference, but it's comments on your proposal, is your supervisor. Nothing like that. Josephine, I don't think we have anything like that, but that might be a very good idea, which I can basically take it to create kind of a Teams channel or I think the SENSS student community, the committee has a Facebook page, as far as I understand. But I might take that idea to them and see whether they can take it forward to develop something like that. I imagine this is more a student-driven initiative than a SENSS-driven initiative, in the sense that it is better to talk to other students than actually talk to us and talk to like-minded people. Melissa is asking, do I have to apply for an integrated PhD if I intend to take the 1 plus 3.5 pathway? Do I apply for the master's then the PhD? No, you apply for the PhD and then we make a decision as to whether you need the master's. So the application is not for a master's, the application is for a PhD, and then the home institution will guide you, should you be successful. They almost they guarantee you a place to a master's effectively, and then you could do the master's. But the application has to be for a PhD place. Uh, uh, Manjula is asking whether there are any age limits for a PhD, and I'm smiling because one of the things we have been very hardly trying to do over the last few years is to make SENSS the doctoral training partnership of choice for people coming from diverse and underrepresented backgrounds. So from our perspective, there are no age limits, there are no race limits, there are no ethnicity limits, there are no disability limits, there's nothing. To the contrary, we would actually try to encourage people coming from diverse backgrounds, coming from underrepresented groups, to come to us and apply for a PhD. And if we can offer them additional support, and you feel that we can offer you additional support, please do reach out to me, and I'll do my best to offer you that support. Josephine has already provided her LinkedIn profile. If anybody wants to connect with me, I'm also on LinkedIn. I try to respond to messages on LinkedIn. I've got the contact details of the team at the end of this presentation, and I'll be sharing them with you. I'll take a couple more questions and then I'll move on. If someone started the PhD before January 2024, but has a total remaining PhD period of more than 50% due to a suspension period, could they still apply for this scholarship? Yes. So if you have intermediate, or if you have, it's a matter of how much time you have left in your PhD. So yes, if you've started, for example, in October 2023, but you had a significant period of intermission, that means that you have more than 50% of time left in your PhD. So you can, yes, you can apply. What about cases where the university doesn't offer an integrated PhD? So it's still possible. So what you will be doing, Matt, is you will be applying for the PhD, and then through that application, we will assess whether you actually need a master's. If we assess that you need a master's, we will be working with Essex. What usually happens there is working with Essex, yourself and your supervisor, to ensure that you undertake the most relevant and most appropriate master's. So, and yes, we will be covering the cost of that master's, is because we will be offering you the 4.5 years instead of the 3.5 years. Right. Two areas where applications have a slight advantage. First of all, we are keen, which goes to my earlier comment about age limits, keen to receive applications from those who meet certain criteria, especially around equality and diversity, protected characteristics, ethnic backgrounds, growing up in a less affluent area, having a disability, being a carer, having been a care as a child. You need to be a home student to meet one of those criteria. You will have the option of indicating that in your equal opportunities form. And what happens is, as I said, we then let institutions know which protected characteristics you're coming from, and those institutions can decide to put you as their additional nominations. But we have also, from this year onwards, have ring-fenced 3 studentships at the management board list at the final stage of the competition for candidates coming from a BAME background. So the 3 candidates that will appear, the top 3 candidates that will appear on that list coming from a BAME background, will automatically receive a studentship should they be on that list. So this is the first group of applications that have a slight advantage. The other group of applications that has a slight advantage is applications which are focusing on data skills or advanced quantitative methods. So these are what we call STEER studentships from the SRC, and the SRC has asked us to give them priority. So if your application is using big data sets, or if your application is using advanced quantitative methods, you can always highlight that in your application. We actually have on the application form a box where you tick and you say, yes, I'm using data skills, I'm using AQM. These are not only for home students, these are also open for international students. We've got on the website 2 documents that give you additional information. And what usually happens is these applications there are 3 for data skills and 3 for AQM that are, again, ring fenced. So the top 3 data skills, the top 3 AQM will receive funding. And as I said, on the presentation, I've got the hyperlinks, and these are all on the website. Any questions before I move on to the 2 topics, which are, spend some time, very small amount of time on finding a supervisor, and then talking a bit more about our evaluation of proposals. Let me just very quickly skim through my chat to see whether there's anything that I haven't picked up. I'll talk a bit about the research proposal for the scholarship. So the scholarship, the word count does not include annexes and references, but the advice we always give to candidates is don't overdo it with annexes and references. And I'll come back to that. I've got a question here from Harry. If a person is targeting the research through qualitative perspective, then their applications share equal weightage or quantitative application? No, there's no suggestion that, whether a quantitative or a qualitative application, someone submits one or the other, is actually getting more, has more brownie points, if I use that expression, in the selection process. What I did say about the 3 ring-fenced ones is these are 3 studentships for what we would call advanced quantitative skills. So you would need to have, a very highly sophisticated methodological approach that you're proposing for your project in order to qualify. And usually we have several of those over the year, over the competition, and we just simply award the ring fence to the top 3 ones. So there are usually more than 3 in advanced quantitative methods and more than 3 in data skills. But whether a panel will look more favorable to an application that has a quantitative than a qualitative methodological approach, no, that's not the case. What we do is we look at whether there is a match between the research questions, what the project aims to achieve, and the research methodology. So it depends on the research question what kind of methodological approach you will be focusing on, rather than simply come up with a methodological approach which is very exciting and very, very innovative. Right. Finding a supervisor, I just want to say a few words. It's quite important to find a supervisor as soon as possible. And my suggestion is to go through the websites of the institutions, think about your topic. Why? Because your supervisor will be asked to work with you to develop the proposal, and also your supervisor will be asked to provide us with a statement once you submit your application about their perspective on the project and also their expertise in supervising you. And that also becomes part of the evaluation criteria that I will come back to in a minute. So finding a supervisor is actually quite important. If you don't know the institution, but you know your topic, my suggestion is, use Google Scholar. It's a very good source. If you know the institution, so for example, you've done your master's at Essex and you want to study at Essex and you know the topic, visit the institutional webpage. Some of you might start with an advantage, having gone through a master's degree and having done a dissertation with someone. If you work with them, it's good to explain to them that your aspiration is for a PhD. Now, for those of you that you haven't got a supervisor and you're thinking, oh, I need to contact that individual, it's really, really important to think about the first contact with someone. And when you contact your potential supervisor, it's important to do a number of things. And this is solely from personal experience. I try to respond to every single email that comes to me and asking me to become their supervisor. Um, but obviously, the amount of time I spend addressing each one of those emails depend on the amount of time I can infer the student has spent in sending that email to me. So the first thing that you need to do is you need to address them properly in the email, use their title. In the first instance, don't be informal, be formal. uh, you know Dear Professor XYZ. Try not to say hi X, for example, because it you're demolishing a barrier that you don't have the authority to demolish, put it this way. I usually respond back in the first person, and from that point onwards, you can have that first person discussion. But in the first instance, try to address them properly. Tell them something interesting about yourself. I always respond to people that have put effort in convincing me that they've done something quite important in their lives. Explain your research interests, how you feel that your proposal matches their expertise. Please proofread your email. Don't make any extravagant claims. Oh, I've read your work. I'm really impressed by your work. And especially if you say that you've read your older publications, make sure you have. And then prepare for face-to-face interviews. Think of the questions they may ask you and prepare some answers. One of the things we will be doing uh, once we're getting close to the deadline of the competition is I will be preparing a video which will go onto our website, uh, talking about potential interview questions that you might have to think about when you're doing your institutional questions. So it's really important to establish that channel of communication with the supervisor, ensure that you address them properly, and you prepare with interviews. You prepare to answer any questions they might have, and the the email you send them for the first instance is spotless. Also quite important, even if you don't have a full proposal by that time, please give them at least an abstract. It's better for someone to receive an abstract than simply a title, because if I receive a title, I don't know what the topic will look like. I don't know what the methodological approach. So tell them in a few words, why the topic is important, why um, what are the questions that you would like to answer, and also what is your methodological or your thoughts on your methodological approach. So at least you can start that conversation. So that's quite important. I've got a slide later on with a couple of links on pieces that I've written in the past on finding a supervisor, so that piece will give you some additional information. Right. I'll pick up those three questions now before I move on. Esther is asking, apart from the fees that the funding covers, what other funding benefits that SENSS provides? So you get your fees covered, you get a stipend as well, which is at the moment is just over £20,000 per year. It's tax-free if you're not working. And if you are in one of the London universities, that is topped up by what we call the London allowance, which is anything between £2,500 to £3,500, depending on how close the institution is to the center of London. So those are the direct kind of payment. So your fees paid and the stipend. But as I said earlier, you also have access to a pot of money, which is up to £3,500 over the duration of your PhD to fund conferences, additional training, or anything else that it's quite important for your training and development. So that's the kind of funding offer. The next question is, in assessing the methods and methodology of one's PhD proposal, is the tools for data analysis going to be considered? It is. It's a crucial part of the methodology. Look, the answer here is the following. The more clarity and confidence you give us, and when I refer to us, I mean the panel, that you know where you're heading with that PhD and where you're heading with that methodology, the better it is. So if you explain to us why this methodology, why these tools, why they're important, and also accessing data, it gives us confidence that the project is going to be feasible. I'll come back to the question of feasibility in a minute when I show you the kind of criteria we use, because one of the criteria we use includes feasibility. So it's not only being a good proposal, but we also want to make sure that it is a feasible proposal within the time frame. If someone presents to us a fantastic proposal, but it's a long-term research plan, it's not a PhD. It's something very, very different. And then the next question was, should the supervisor statement also be received by the 22nd of January? The answer is yes. So what happens is the complete application, which includes a supervisory statement, and we don't separate the supervisory statement from that application, has to be received by the 22nd. So once you complete your part of the application, the system generates automatically an email that goes to your supervisor to the address that you have given us, which is quite important. So you need to make sure that you spell it properly. And that email asks the supervisor to basically submit their supervisory statement, which they can have written before, and they simply copy paste or upload. They don't need to see the application. The expectation is that they will have seen your application in the making. There are no SENSS specific supervisors. Any supervisor from any of those 8 institutions, any academic colleague can actually support a SENSS application. So there's no list of SENSS approved supervisors. This is something that the institutions are doing. So, the institutions basically decide whether someone can be a supervisor. For example, if there is an early career researcher that you want to have as a supervisor, what they might need to do is bring someone more senior on board on that team, but they can still be your primary supervisor, having that second person supporting them. So there's no such thing as a list of SENSS supervisors. All colleagues from all 8 institutions have the potential to act as supervisors. Can the home university representative help in finding a supervisor? Yes, that would be one thing. You could always look at the admissions team and the PhD directors at those institutions and help you. Some institutions have, this list of find a PhD supervisor on the website where you could put your topic, and they can give you some names. But also on the website, we have the contact details from each of those institutions. You could always email them and say, I'm looking to do a PhD in that particular area. Could you help me identify who might be the most appropriate person to do that? I'm afraid, Esther, that yes, we are not, the funding we receive from the SRC does not include anything like air tickets or visa support or medical support and accommodation, the fees and the monthly stipends. And that's something that I'm afraid is not us, it's the SRC rules and regulations that they have permissible and non-permissible uses of funds. And visa cost and air ticket costs are not permissible funds. We would be funding air tickets, for example, if you were to do field work. So if, for example, you get funding for a PhD and you want to do field work somewhere, those tickets and those visa costs to visit that location will be part of your application, and we will be able to fund those. But funding visa for coming to the UK and medical support, and I appreciate that this has become quite a big expense over the last few years, especially the medical support, are not part of our funding offer. And some universities might be able to support you through some kind of hardship funds they have, but that's not the case for all universities in SENSS. If a home PhD student undertakes additional employment at the same time as their PhD, does that affect the tax-free status of their STEM stipend? I think it has to do with the level of the part-time work, Matt. It's a question that perhaps I can transfer you to Felicity if you want to get a very concrete answer, because she knows far better those ESRC regulations. And there are specific types of work So for example, part-time work for a university. So if, for example, someone does, I don't know, teaching assistant for their home institution, I think that does not stop them from getting a tax-free stipend. If someone is working for another organization, it might be. So there are certain conditions. It's not a black or white kind of situation. I'm more than happy to take forward that question to Felicity, and she can give you a very clear guidance from the SRC when actually this is a tax-free stipend and not. Right, so I want to move on to the final bit. We've got about 15 minutes ahead of us talking about the strong proposal. And what I'll say here is the way I'm approaching it is giving you the evaluator's perspective. So when a proposal comes to us as SENSS, what are the things we are looking for into that proposal for it to stand out from the big pile, if I may say that. So if I take you through last year's competition, we received 400 applications. Institutions shifted initially those 400 applications. Most institutions used our own evaluation criteria, so they didn't use anything else. Those institutions submitted just over 150 applications to SENSS out of those 400. And then out of those 150, almost half of them, about 80, progressed to the final stage of the competition where you've got that big list. So it's really, really important to basically have something that stands out, because reviewers and panels will be seeing quite a few applications. So my aim here is just to highlight what are the most important things that you need to put together. First of all, in this process, it's quite important to incorporate as much as feedback you can from the process and discuss your research proposal with your supervisor. It's also quite crucial to have a very good read of the SENSS application guidance on HI Apply. All the details are there. We tell you exactly what we need in each section of that application. And obviously, for me, it would take probably about 4.5 hours, 5 hours to take you through every single detail of that. But there is a very big guidance document there which tells you exactly in each box what the expectations are. And as I said, the application has two stages: statement, application, and statement from the supervisor. These can only take place in sequence, but they need to be with us by the 22nd of January. The key focus here is in partnership with the supervisor to discuss your research proposal and get them involved in the build-up of that proposal. Give them confidence that you're a good candidate so they can support you as best as they can. So what we ask you to do is provide us with the title, an abstract, the proposal, which is not 10,000 words, it's 10,000 characters. So that's something quite important. I'm afraid that's the way the system works. So HI Apply doesn't count words, counts characters. And there is a personal statement, which is usually a maximum of 500 words. Now, my main piece of advice, even before I say anything about the way we evaluate our proposal, is don't write directly onto HI Apply. Put your information on a Word file and then transfer that information to HI Apply. It's a stable system, but it's still an online system. And it could be failure from your side. If you're working in a part of the world where electricity might not be, stable, it might be sometimes our problem. The system hangs, and we can't do anything about that. So make sure that you have the information you transfer to HI Apply on a Word document anyway. So it's quite crucial. It is kind of heartbreaking to have done work for 2 hours on an online system and then lose that work just because something happened. So that's one important thing. The essential ingredients of your proposal need to be the issue. What problem does your research address? You could make reference, for example, to the Sustainable Development Goals there. You could make reference to the theme that you're applying to. Then you need to think about your research design and how the research achieve its objective. What is the most important uh, research design here? How you're going to answer those questions. And then also you need to think about the beneficiaries, who benefits, what will you contribute? Is it academic knowledge? Is it practice? Is it practical implications? Is it policy implications? Who is going to be the beneficial? And the reason I'm talking about the benefit here is that, as you will see in a minute, one of our criteria also includes impact of the proposal. So we would expect you to elaborate on what kind of impact your proposal might have. Is it a proposal that changes practice in an organization? Is it a proposal that gives us new solutions to an existing problem? What is your proposal trying to do? So the issue, the design, and the benefit are the essential ingredients of any kind of good proposal. So it's key to your application. We look at high quality and strong potential for doctoral study, and it should include the key areas of the project, why you wish to pursue this research, the research problems and questions you intend to address, the context sometimes. And my question always is, if there is a specific context that you're doing this work, can this context be generalizable? If not, why not? So on and so forth. And what is the particular contribution to knowledge, the methods you will be using, and how the project will develop over the period of the award. Are there any key stages, any timetable, and also how the doctoral research relates to your eventual career aims through your personal statement. Generally, typos, lack of clarity, extreme jargon, a very brief proposal with long references sections are things that put off reviewers. And the typos and the lack of clarity give us a sense of the amount of attention you have spent on the project, how much time you've spent, and gives us confidence. If it's a spotless proposal, gives us confidence that, when you go out and do your research design, it will also be spotless. So it's quite important to keep that in mind. The extreme jargon is also quite important, and something that you can discuss with your supervisor, because the proposal will be evaluated by people that might not be direct experts in your area. The thematic panels are interdisciplinary panels, and they have a variety of people sitting on them. Each one of them comes from a very different perspective, and therefore you need to talk to them as if they are kind of not necessarily experts in your specific area. So, description of the proposal, research background, the questions, research methods, timeline, and impact are the expected things we would like to see in the proposal. There are 4 assessment criteria that we use. The first one, which is the biggest one, is quality and feasibility. So the quality is effectively, is it a good idea? Is it an innovative idea? Is it kind of an idea that can be implemented? And then, do we get confidence that it is feasible? It's something that you could deliver within the funding period. The second criterion is around interdisciplinarity and impact potential. How it will use different theories and approaches, and how it will generate impact to the outside world. The third one is about you being able to demonstrate that you can actually deliver this proposal. And the fourth one, and this is why the supervisory statement is so important, is whether there is evidence of the quality of the local research environment, including the supervisory expertise, whether your supervisor is the most appropriate person to supervise you, and whether they have the expertise. There is a separate section where, yes, you can add the bibliography references, which is not part of the 10,000 characters. So these are the 4 kind of criteria. Now let me kind of turn them around a bit and say a few words on each one of them, and present them in a slightly different way than simply the linear way I've done them so far. So you could see here the definition. In your In the guidance we have for the competition, you will see a very detailed description of each one of them. And at the end of the guidance, you will also see a big table, which is part of the guidance, that will explain what constitutes a very good proposal, an excellent proposal. So what is a 10 and what is a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4. So you could look at that table and get a better understanding of the criteria. So the first one, the evidence of the quality and feasibility, is based on the outline of the proposal, based on the information supplied by the supervisor. But what we're looking for is your ability to design and conduct a research project, a good research plan, and also an awareness of where you stand on the current field, which is, a very good understanding of the literature. So in simple terms, innovate, make sure your idea stands out. Remember, those people that are going to be reviewing the application will be reviewing at least 30 applications, so your idea needs to stand out. Support, ensure that you have adequately covered the literature. Do not under or over promise. That talks to the feasibility question. And ensure that you have appropriate methodology. And in many cases, we also ask about a contingency plan. If you're promising us interviews and suddenly you realize that those interviews won't take place, what are you going to do? Is there a contingency plan? If you thinking about conducting a survey and, because of survey fatigue, you don't end up getting enough responses, what's happening there? So that's around the quality of the research proposal. The second big area is this evidence that you're well prepared for your purpose, research and future career. It's about your prior experience. As I said, there is a long section where you tell us about your prior training. And it's not only academic training, it's academic, professional, and life experiences. So someone with a family, for example, most of the time they need to have a relatively good time management. That's something you could tell us, because time management is quite crucial in the context of the PhD. So how your prior experience, academic, professional, life experience has prepared you for postgraduate studies and research. And also, obviously we start with the performance at undergraduate and postgraduate level. We think about your professional experience, and also we look at how the program will contribute to your long-term career goals. So not only you need to have a strong proposal, but you need to convince us that you are the appropriate person to take it forward, that you have the right skills, the right motives, and the right drive. So that's the first set combination, your proposal and yourselves as an individual being able to deliver to that. And then it comes the third part of that triangle, that equation, which is the quality of the supervisory team. And based on your proposed supervisor's research areas, knowledge and expertise, based on the supervisor's statement, the individual roles of the proposed team, that's not necessarily you providing that information, is your supervisor providing that information. But this is why it's quite important to work together, because the more information you give them, the better the position they will be to write their supervisory statement. So it's not only, again, going back to the simple terms, it's not only an excellent proposal, it's not only that you are the best person for that proposal, but also that you have developed around you a team with experience and expertise that can identify training and development needs, and they can support you throughout that journey. So it takes 3 bits to make things very, very, to make things successful and strong. So on top of that, the personal statement gives us information and the panel's information about your academic interests, your SENSS, talks to us about your motivation, why you want to pursue a PhD. And, tell us about what you find appealing, what you want to do in terms of your training, and also, passion for the topic, existing knowledge, existing experience. All these things are quite important for us. Imagine your personal statement as, because we don't get to see you. We don't, at SENSS, we don't interview. The interviews usually take place at the university level, and you will get an interview at the university level. But it's almost like this statement brings to life your passion and your willingness to pursue the PhD. Now, I've got here some additional information in terms of the website for the studentships. There are 2 blogs there for application to PhD funding and how to apply for a PhD in the UK. These blogs contain some additional information. Any academic inquiry, you could use the director email. Any administrative matters or issues with the application platform, email our admin at SENSS email account, and we usually try to respond as quickly as possible. Obviously, the administrative matters and issues with the application matter take priority because they hinder your ability to apply to SENSS. If there are more academic discussions, I try to respond as quickly as possible. Usually over 48 hours, I have a good turnaround of emails, and I'm using signposting to basically guide you. Right, I'll pause here. I'll take the question by Susathi, which is many universities require 3 publishable research papers for the award of a PhD. The proposal we are going to submit to SENSS may be the basis for one of those. Can we undertake research on other topics if we were awarded the scholarship? Now, if your proposal, so if your PhD eventually deviate substantially from your initial proposal, there is a process that needs to be followed, and that process is a major changes to my PhD process. This is how we call it, but there is a process where you can eventually deviate from your initial proposal, and that can happen for a number of reasons. We had to do a lot of those over the last few years because of COVID, as you understand. So the answer is yes, but sometimes the 3 publishable papers are a good way of presenting a proposal. I have seen proposals in the competition, especially in certain areas like finance, business and management, things like that, where they do require the 3 publishable papers. And it's then down to you and your supervisor to convince us that this is the most appropriate way of achieving the aims and the goals of the PhD. I've left the slides up for a significant amount of time. I'll pause here and ask whether there are any additional questions. 2 things to highlight is that please keep an eye on the website. We will be advertising these additional sessions with our student committee, where you can ask questions around the PhDs that are not necessarily directly relevant to the webinar that we're doing today. So that's one. The other thing is we will be holding 2 more of those webinars. I think one is on the 27th of November and one is on the 18th of December. I will be converting those 2 webinars not to the formal presentation as I've done today, but more to a question and answer session. So I've done 3, the way we're doing it is we've done 3 webinars, one daytime, one evening, and one Saturday, which is today's webinar, to cover diverse audiences. We're going to be doing 2 webinars with our student committee, where you can ask questions around other issues of the studentship, and then the 2 next webinars from SENSS that I will be leading on the 27th of November and the 18th of December are going to be specifically questions and answers webinars. So webinars where you can come on board and ask specific questions that you might have as you've reviewed the material, as you've started working with your supervisor, as you've started developing your proposal. There is a question around taking family members together. I think that's an administrative question. The visa regulations in the UK change so frequently, and I don't know what the new government will be doing over the next few months. They might be changing the regulations as well. So that's perhaps a question that we can discuss once we have better clarity on what the strategy, the kind of foreign immigration strategy from the Labour government will be in the next few months. Rebecca is asking, I have found a supervisor that is happy to work with me, but they are on maternity leave until January, and they can have only brief meetings starting from next month. Advice moving forward. Yes, very good question, actually, and very good point. When you think about your supervisor, it's not, and that's going to be your reality moving forward with the PhD anyway. It's not going to be an individual. We're talking about supervisory teams at SENSS, and this is what most universities are actually doing at the moment. So you will always have your primary supervisor, and then you will also have a secondary supervisor. In some cases, you might have a third supervisor, depending on the nature of the project. So my answer there would be, try to get that supervisor to quickly identify who the other person on that team will be, and that other person perhaps can take the lead in the pre-application phase. You could have some brief meetings where the crucial input is required, and then move with that secondary supervisor. That secondary supervisor might also be the person that can submit the supervisory statement. It doesn't have to be the main supervisor. The way that statement reads, because it is specifically, it doesn't ask about the supervisor, it asks about the supervisory team and how the supervisory team is structured around you and around your proposal. So that, Rebecca, that would be my advice at the moment moving forward. So coming back, as I said, 2 more webinars where they're going to be question and answer webinars. I will be opening up. Of course, if you've got any questions around, selecting a theme, supporting in finding a supervisor, do get in touch with us. We try our best. As you appreciate, I don't know every single individual in those 8 institutions. I have about much better knowledge of Essex, much better knowledge of East Anglia because I used to work there. I know Middlesex quite well. So there might be institutions I can support you more, but if not, what I can always do is I can always signpost you towards the most appropriate person for supporting you in your application. There are what we call academic leads and operational leads that work with SENSS in each and every institution out of those 8, and they will be able to help you, point you towards the most appropriate department, school for your supervision. Right, I've got if anybody wants to leave, I'll just simply picking up any remaining questions. I know we've run slightly over time. I will keep recording until the end of the question, so you might be revisiting the last few minutes. The date of the next webinars, both dates are on the website. I keep referring you to the website because it's our most important source of knowledge. The 2 dates, if I remember from heart, is 27th of November and 18th of December, the 2 next dates. And you've got the times. I don't remember the times, but they are there. If anything changes, again, we will be posting it on the website. Before I move forward, someone else asked me about what is YouTube. SENSS does have a YouTube channel. So if you go on YouTube and search for SENSS, you will find our YouTube channel, all the recordings. Our annual conferences are there, so you get a sense of the community and what we do as an organization, if you want to spend some time reviewing that. Now, there is an interesting question around the role of the primary and the secondary supervisor and whether it's mandatory to have. And it's not an offense if you say to a person being a secondary supervisor. So what usually happens is UK universities are now working with what we call supervisory teams, and there are several reasons for that. The most important is your main supervisor might be going under a bus. Unlucky, but it could happen. they don't want you to left you hanging out there not knowing what's happening. So there's always a team of people. It could also be the case that the primary supervisor has the conceptual expertise on the subject, and the secondary supervisor has the methodological expertise on the subject. It could be that the two supervisors work together in different ways. So I've got, for example, a colleague I used to work with from the University of Kent. They have been extremely meticulous in providing very detailed feedback. They needed to have every I kind of noted, every T crossed. That was their work. In my perspective, when I was providing feedback, I was more of a high level kind of, oh, this is the way we need to move forward. So having that combination of two people that work like that is amazing for a PhD student, because at the same time they get a good understanding of the strategic direction of the project, but also they get someone that gives them very detailed feedback on their work. So there is a team that works around you and supports you. So the person of the secondary supervisor, it's not an offensive term. It's not that they are secondary in nature, but they are fulfilling a different role in that supervisory team. And as I said, the way that division of work takes place has to be decided by you and the individuals. And it could be that, as I said, the earlier question, my primary supervisor is going on maternity leave or is going on research leave. So what happens? The secondary supervisor steps up, becomes the primary supervisor for that period of time. When they return, they become again the secondary supervisor. It's the way the team works. We're just simply calling them primary and secondary because one has the responsibility of doing the administrative bits and submitting the reports and everything like that. So it's not an offensive term. It's a very common term, especially in the UK system. So Harry, that was the answer to your question. I don't think I've got. Is it mandatory for the supervisor to be within SENSS universities? Yes. You need to have a supervisor who is based in one of the SENSS universities. Otherwise, you need to be looking to apply to another doctoral training partnership. So where your supervisor and supervisory team will be based determines which institution, which doctoral training partnership you should be applying to. Very interesting question from Claire. Do both supervisors have to be at SENSS universities? The answer is no. So in the past, you could have two supervisors in two different SENSS universities. So you could have a main supervisor in Essex and a secondary supervisor at City or at East Anglia. There are cases where we have allowed students to have an external, what we call supervisor, but that's something that you would need to negotiate with your home institution, because that external supervisor will probably need to have some form of remuneration. If you're supervising a student, you need to get something for it. It could be part of your workload model, anything like that. So it is down to negotiation between yourselves, your main supervisor, and your home institution, whether you can bring someone as an external supervisor from another university. But there is no regulation that cannot happen. Yes, we're quite open to have people from outside SENSS supervising students. So I've already I've covered the primary and secondary supervisor from the same institution, and they can be different. The data skilled ones, there is a question around asking me to give a brief description of the data skills. So the data skills are projects that require use of significant data sets, and those can be existing data sets or data sets that you are creating. One good example for it is the administrative data research. So this is an ESRC funded project, which basically collects data around education. So just to give you an example, they have a data set that has educational outcomes for pupils in the UK for the last 20 years. So they know every single student, every single pupil in the UK, what kind of education outcomes they have achieved in terms of A levels, and they have also information around their family background, birth conditions, all these things. Now, this is a big it's a big data set, and it requires advanced data skills to manipulate and explore and mine the information. So this is what we would constitute a data skills project for us. And just to put it into the wider perspective, we're talking about now large information, having data sets because of the way we use the internet, the way we use artificial intelligence. So these huge, gigantic, ginormous data sets are being created. The ESRC would like us to train people to have skills that they can help us mine those data sets and extract information. This is why they put so much importance on data skills studentships. Do we need to have these skills in terms of the respective data sets? No, you don't need to have these skills. You basically develop these skills over the course of the PhD. And as I said, in terms of the guidelines for the proposal and the limits, character limits, they're all in the guidance documents. My perspective here is just to give you kind of an oversight. Again, the structure for the proposal, there is guidance in the guidance document. If you want to reach out to me, as I said, the email address is director@senss, SENSS-DTP, doctoral training partnership.ac.uk. And I am to respond, I said, within 48 hours. So I think that was the last question I had in terms of the chat. I'll be making this recording available as soon as I can download it from Zoom and hand it over to our admin assistant to upload it on the website and the YouTube channel where you can review it. And the email is on the website as well. I am pointing again towards the website. The email for academic inquiries is director@senss, SENSS-DTP, doctoral training partnership.ac.uk. I'll pick Matt's question as the last one. When providing the two academic references, is it ever seen as a conflict of interest to provide an academic that you have worked with on a research project? Now, this is a question that, from a SENSS perspective, doesn't really matter. As part of the SENSS application, we don't ask you to provide references. The institution might ask you to provide references as part of the PhD admission process. But I think what you described there, I wouldn't necessarily see it as a conflict of interest. You've worked with someone in the past, you worked on a research project. It's absolutely fine for them to provide you with a reference. I think that's all from my side. I said 2 more webinars. Look at the website, 18th and 27th, 27th of November, 18th of December. Questions and answers webinars. They're just a month before the 18th of December, just a month before the deadline. Good luck with your proposals. Good luck with your application. And I hope to come back to you, in later sessions with more answers to your questions. Thank you very much.